Resident Evil 6 has a lot of different enemies in it. If you count the variations of things like the Juavo and the different variations of chrysalis enemies, then I'd say it may have the most enemies out of any Resident Evil game that we've seen to date. And while some of those enemies may be similar to what we've seen before in the series, I thought today it would be fun to make a list of some of the ones that I think are the best to come out of this game regardless. Keep in mind that this is my list, and as such will probably differ from yours, so feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. All that being said, let's kick this list off with Howl's probably has the best design in the game in my opinion. His translucent blue skin showing off his humanoid skeleton underneath just gives this foe a really interesting and visually appealing look that I think makes him look really distinct. His backstory is also really interesting to know if you take the time to look into it. The fact that he was basically Neo Umbrella's ace in the hole, an immaculately designed BOW that could do everything from turn humans into zombies to divide and multiply to cover the entire globe in a matter of days. However, for me, this is kind of where the majesty of this creature ends. His involvement in the game is minimal to say the least, which is fine, but for him to be such a big part of Neo Umbrella's plan, he is regulated to only the final chapter of Chris and Pierre's journey, and always felt a bit tacked on. He just hatches from his cocoon, attacks the first people that he sees, and then promptly gets put in the ground. It's kind of an unceremonious end to a creature that Carla was planning to become the king of this chaotic new world that she wanted to create. His boss fight also never struck me as terribly unique or interesting. I like that he cocoons himself and that you can get a different look at combat if you're playing as Piers, but shoot the sore spots and attack him when he's down is a pretty tried and true method of killing enemies in this game. And nothing really stood out to me that made his encounter any better than those that came before him. All that being said, he's still got a great design and backstory. But without seeing how devastating he was actually described to be, he comes off as a bit forgettable to me, unfortunately. Insectia is a very odd creature for this game, and one that I don't think would make many people's lists. Visually, it will probably remind you of Yawn from the first Resident Evil game, obviously because they're both giant snakes, but it also borrows invisibility from the Farfarello of Resident Evil Revelations. This awkward combination makes for a very different and unique encounter for the game that for some reason I just find very engaging. It reminds me of a movie like Anaconda. Going up against a gigantic snake as it slowly whittles down your forces is in itself a fun concept. However, it also plays well into Chris's story, with Chris losing another unit that he is captain of and having to deal with that fact, which plays well into what he's going through. It's just a section of the game that I think is interesting and a nice break from the hundreds of Juavo that you've been slaughtering in the city. However, that being said, the creature's backstory is pretty well non-existent. In fact, the passage about the creature doesn't really even tell me what the creature is derived from. Was it a snake that was injected with a C virus and this is the result? Or was this a person that was injected with a C virus and for some reason they came out as a giant snake? The passage only says that it's a mutation, but a mutation of what? Regardless though, I think that this creature has a really interesting place in the campaign, and provides a different mechanic for you to deal with in your journey. And while it's not a creature that I really think about unless I'm playing this game, it's still one that I like a fair bit. To be completely honest with you, Ustanak is brought to the third place on this list because I just don't like his visual design all that much. Sure, he is distinct and one of the most memorable creatures that you're going to encounter in this game, but he is just ugly as sin. I mean, look at this thing. When Jake punches him at the end of the game and his loose face skin just kind of flaps around, I don't know. I just don't like it. That being said, I do still like Ustanak. and I've only grown fonder of him as I've been replaying through the game. Learning his backstory, while I don't think it's revolutionary, it is interesting and gives his character a greater context as to why he's doing what he's doing. I know several people called him a simp for Carla in my Who Is video on him, and I get it, but I see it more as devotion to her for allowing him to see his dreams made manifest, rather than him hoping for some kind of affection or adoration from her. As for the fights that are tied to this creature, there are some that stand out. His ability to make drones and the stealth section that comes with it are pretty unique. But when you're fighting him straight up, as you often are, he's pretty much just a bullet sponge, taking a certain amount of damage before he is momentarily disposed of. They do change this up with a fist fight at the end between Ustanak and Jake, but I really just don't like this fight. I think you're supposed to get him near the edge so Jake can punch him into the lava, but it always just takes me way too long to get to that conclusion. So, for me, while I think Ustanak is the most iconic creature to come out of this game, and the one most associated with it, he's not my favorite. But still, he's close enough to make it in my top 3. The Lipotita is a creature that would have been much lower on this list had I not played the game a second time in preparation for my lore videos. To me, the walking animation of the Lipotita and the awkward way that it moves around in general just struck me as a bit awkward. The creature's design was also a little weird. I understood that the holes were pores, but I didn't really see the point of having my character fight a creature like this. However, I have to say, learning the backstory of this creature has really given me a new appreciation for it. I think what makes this creature my number 2 pick is that beyond just how strong it is in the traditional way, this is a BOW that actually has some implementation beyond just its physicality, which is kind of a rarity for the series. In fact, the Lipotita isn't really even intended for fighting. Its main focus is on infecting the general population and turning them into zombies. The Lipotita is also responsible for probably my favorite section of Resident Evil 6 as well, the opening of Leon's campaign and the city of Tall Oaks. The Lipotita were placed strategically around the city and used as a way to infect the population, because each creature could release their airborne gas around the circumference of 3 miles, and Simmons placed them around Tall Oaks accordingly. Outside of that, while their design has grown on me a bit, they still aren't my favorite designs in the series. However, one thing that I can say for them is that they are wholly unique to this game. Ustanak is roughly based off Nemesis, Insectia is based off Yawn, and even my number 1 takes inspiration from another enemy in the series. However, the Lipotita is one of the enemies that I think is wholly unique to this game, and for that reason, as well as the others, it makes the number 2 spot on this list. The Rosslepanje is Resident Evil 6's attempt to recreate the greatness of the Regenerators from Resident Evil 4. And while I don't think that they live up to the creep factor that the Regenerators offer, they are still my favorite enemies to come out of this game. The Rosslepanje take the unkillable nature of the Regenerators and expand upon the idea. They are virtually indestructible. Even if you incapacitate them, they will usually just get back up. And they can even tear pieces off, and those body parts will act independently from the main host. These creatures are also aesthetically similar to the Regenerators, being a big gray humanoid in appearance. However, while there are certain similarities to be seen, these creatures are different enough from the Regenerators that I don't really think about the connections in the game. I like pretty much everything about the Rosslepanje. I think that the mechanic of them tearing off their limbs is pretty interesting, even though it's pretty well only regulated to their hands. And even though they are kind of basic in their normal appearance, I still find it appealing. As for backstory, while it's light, I like that the creature that you would think of as the Rosslepanje is basically just a skin suit. The real creature is the slug-like thing that comes out of its mouth from time to time. This explains why the creature has such an odd walking animation, and somewhat explains why it can function even with detached limbs. The noises that the creature make are also pretty creepy. While I don't think they top the belabored breathing of the Regenerators by any means, it's unique and I like the high-pitched voices that they have. All in all, I just think that this creature is a really solid one. Nothing about it really stands out to me as to why I like it so much, but what I think of when I think of this creature is its severed hand creepily crawling towards you in the back alleys of a Chinese marketplace. So whenever I think about this creature, my mind goes to this highlight of the game. So for those reasons, the Rosslepanje takes the #1 spot on this list. Anyways, those are my top picks for the game. What are yours? Feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I will also say that I didn't consider Carla or Derek for this list because I see them more as characters rather than just enemies, so I don't think they're really comparable to the others that are on this list. All that being said, thank you all for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.